How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to another video here on the channel. In today's video, I'm going to be doing some body work on the C5 Corvette build, or at least getting started on it. In particular, I'm going to be working on the front bumper because that is the most damaged body panel on this car from the accident that it was in before I bought it. And during this process, I'm also going to go over, so I'll put some time markers in the video and a pinned comment on where to go if you're just wanting to watch for this content. I'm also going to talk about what materials are best to use to repair body panels on a C5 Corvette, because there are many different kinds of materials that all the panels are made out of, and they kind of require their own special material to some degree. And typical body repair materials don't work well on this car because of the type of materials it's made from. So anyways, I'm going to go over kind of all the materials that I've got that I'm going to be working with, and some of the things that I've learned along the way as well. So first step of the process is I'm going to go ahead and get this front bumper taken off the car. Alright, so the plan is to start with the backside repair on the bumper, just because I just figured, you know, I can reinforce this and get that squared away, and then spend more time focusing on the part that everyone's going to see, which is obviously the front side. So basically the first step is, I already did this a while ago, but I'm going to hit this again just to try and, you know, get the remaining amount off. There's still a little bit of remnants from the old Bondo glass that I used on here, so obviously to give as clean and direct of a substrate for the new adhesive to bond to, I'm going to try and sand some of that off with 60 grit to prep the surface as best I can. And then once I do that, I'll introduce you guys to the material that I'll be using and kind of my methodology that I'll be using as well. Alrighty everyone, welcome to my driveway. So we are resuming the video on repairing my crash damaged C5 Corvette's front bumper. And where I left you guys off in the last video was I was basically sanding down all of the old material that I used to try and repair this bumper, and the key word there is try, because it didn't work so well. The previous materials I used was a combination of Bondo glass and like a wire mesh as reinforcement. The Bondo glass did not bond well to the substrate of the bumper material, and that is because this material is a very interesting thermoset resin plastic. It is not a thermoplastic, so you can't plastic weld this. It just burns, it doesn't melt again. So the goal today is to try and repair it with the correct materials, and like I said previously, I contacted 3M, talked to an applications engineer actually at 3M, and they recommended a few different products for this bumper that I'll be using today. So I was able to sand and grind down all of the old remaining body repair material on the bumper. So now we've got a nice clean substrate, or at least after I vacuum here we will. I was doing a little bit more minor cleanup with a burr bit on my Dremel tool. So once I vacuum that up and alcohol prep the surface and clean it, we'll go ahead and get to doing the backside repair first on the bumper, and then the front side repair will be next after that sets and cures. I'll be kind of using the same procedure. I have a special 3M epoxy that I'll be using as the actual repair material, but I'll also be using a stainless steel wire mesh as like a rebar reinforcement to the repair area. So let's go ahead and get this thing prepped up. It's a very awkward piece to work on. I might just bring this into the garage there and throw it on my workbench. I think since it's more at working height there instead of trying to kneel on the ground, I'd have to have a really big table that is supportive, because this thing wants to twist and contort in all sorts of ways if it's not sitting on a large flat surface, and obviously we don't want this thing all tweaked when we're doing the epoxy repair and bonding on it. So I'm also going to throw in a few zip ties to reinforce the crack area, and the zip tie will partially get bonded into the epoxy on the back side, but I'll snip it off on the front side so you won't even be able to see it. But that'll just keep the crack aligned, because sometimes it wants to lift or lift over top of each side, especially when you move the bumper around. So anyways, I'm going to stop talking and we're going to go ahead and get started with this repair.
We've got all the food we need in the back. So come with us on this epic journey. We're going to be hitting the road.
And for those wondering, yes, I do watch Mighty Car Mods in the background when I'm working on my own car. It's just kind of fun to have some background noise. I just realized I probably never gave you guys a close-up of the actual repair area, so let's go ahead and do that now so you can see what we're working with. So all the light gray you can see is where I really hit it with the DA sander, and to get all of the remaining Bondo glass off of the inside of the bumper. So you can see the main damage is right up in here. So we've got a bunch of, we got some holes, we got some chips, and then the main crack starts here and then goes all the way down this way. And you can see all the holes I drilled there through were to help zip tie stitch this to stabilize the crack when I was still driving the car. Also, the crack propagates down through here as well. So, you know, this bumper and some over here. So this bumper is definitely not in the best of shape, but, you know, it's really hard to get a secondhand bumper, especially with shipping, because it's such a large, awkward piece to ship. So, you know, I think I'm pretty confident with the materials that I got that I'll be able to do this the right way this time, and with some experience and some practice on the car, I think we'll be able to get the front side looking good as well. So like I was saying, I'll probably throw a few zip ties through some of these holes here to make sure the crack is aligned nicely, so the two sides aren't overlapping each other and it's pulled taut to each other. And basically I'm just gonna, I cleaned up all the surfaces here. One of the other things I did, mostly on the front side, was I grooved out the cracks, so there's some actual surface area for the epoxy to sit in, and it's not just sitting on the surface. So on the back side is going to be a little bit more of a rough repair, but I'm going to try and make it look as nice as possible as well. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and start wiping the surface down with alcohol, and then I'll get the materials out and we can start getting ready to put it all on. So just for reference, here's the stainless steel mesh that I got. It's a pretty fine mesh, so I'll use some scissors and cut it up to basically kind of align it along the crack and damage areas. And so what my plan is I'm going to lay down a layer of adhesive first, kind of squish this into that, and try and smooth that down, and then put more adhesive over top of it, and hopefully that should give us a very strong repair on the backside. Again, the backside's not meant to look pretty, but it's meant to be structural and keep anything from cracking or being cracking again, basically. So got this off Amazon for like $9. And then I'll probably end up, I know in the beginning of the video I said I would go over all of the materials I'm going to be using for all the different repair areas on the car, but what I'm thinking of doing is actually doing a separate video on all the body repair materials I use for this car, just in case something doesn't work out. I can kind of report back on that, but for the sake of the video, here's the stuff I'll be using today. So it's 3M 05885 rigid parts repair. So it's got an 8-minute dwell time, 10-minute working time, and a 30-minute sanding time. Maybe or maybe not, I might sand it to knock some of the high areas down, but I think for the most part this will give us a really solid repair for the backside. And this doesn't require any adhesion promoter, but the stuff I'm using on the front side does. So a lot of things to consider. So just like when you're working with most two-part epoxies, you probably want to get yourself some rubber gloves, just because getting this stuff on your fingers, it's not the end of the world, but it's pretty nasty stuff, and if you don't get it off right away, it kind of stays on your hand for like a week. So, and I'm sure the chemicals aren't great either in these things, so obviously if you're getting exposed to this frequently, like if this is part of your job, I'm sure you wear PPE, but you know, just taking the extra precaution. And what I'm thinking too is probably for some of the hard to reach areas, I'm gonna have to extrude some epoxy and then smooth it down with my finger to get it to lay down nicely. Okay, so I'm cutting up some pieces of the wire mesh. So I got this little strip here, and I kind of put a little bend in it, so it's gonna hug this contour around the license plate area, so that fits up pretty nice. And then I got this big piece to go up on the large crack area up here. And then I'll have to cut up some other smaller pieces to cover some of the smaller damage areas, and then also fit in between the two zip ties I put on the crack. Okay, so for all these two-part epoxies, you need a special epoxy gun. So this one, I have two now. So the first one I bought is intended for a certain mix ratio, and this one is kind of like a universal mix ratio plunger system, so that you can use a myriad of amount of different cartridge sizes and mix ratios. So you just pop this guy in here like such, and then the plunger is obviously just like a standard caulking gun going to the back. So what I got to do now is pop this cap off, put the mixing nozzle on, and then extrude some material so that we know we're getting nice mixed material coming out of the gun. And then I'm going to start laying this down. I'll probably smooth it down with my finger with the glove on to get it to lay nicely. We'll put all our mesh on and then extrude a bunch more over that mesh as well. So it's kind of blue. That's interesting. I'm going to put the cap down there because you want to save that in case you don't use all your material. There's a good way you can store that. So you throw your mixing nozzle on through the collar. You still need the collar. Thread that on. And then I've just got like a cardboard tray here that I'm going to go ahead and pump this through. Wow, it is blue. That's interesting. Alright. So just like a standard caulking gun, if you keep the pressure on, it keeps extruding, so you can pop that off so it stops. So let's go ahead and start applying all this. I'm trying to adjust the camera. So the tricky thing is with this epoxy, obviously because you have a mixing nozzle, your working time dictates how long you have before it hardens in the nozzle. So you've got to work somewhat quick to get the material out, otherwise it's going to cure up in the nozzle and then you got to put a whole new nozzle on. And it's definitely dripping. Oh, we're making a mess. That's why I got some cardboard here.
So 12 mil
Ooh. Yeah, definitely wear some gloves when you do this because it is messy.
That is the sound that we want to hear. So that is on. That is on. Now here's the trick, people. Here's the trick.
The only problem is now can't really grip the gun without getting the...
We're going to be swapping.
We're learning on the go here. Yeah, gravity is not working to our favor right now. Oh boy. Alright, so I'm just going to start spreading this down, and I'm going to start putting on our repair reinforcement mesh. You know, when you see it squeeze through like that, probably is good. Means the mesh will be nice and bonded. So this seems to be a better method of put the epoxy directly on the mesh. Should have started a timer so I could see my working time on this. Now, what we're gonna do, ooh, this stuff is getting everywhere. Whatever, we're in it now. So we're just gonna go for it and put as much as we can over top of the mesh to cover it up. Okay everyone, so got the backside epoxy applied onto the bumper. I'll be honest, my approach probably could have been better from the get-go, but you live and you learn. So the biggest challenge I ran into was trying to work on the bumper like this while trying to put epoxy on against gravity. Probably wasn't the best idea to begin with. So what I did was I initially laid down as much as I could, and then I brought the bumper, as you guys saw on camera, I brought it out here and turned it like such, and that gave, like that I guess, and that gave me a lot easier of an area and orientation and setup to work with. It was a messy job between trying to balance extruding and then spreading the material. So I went through a whole pack of rubber gloves, and I still got epoxy all over my epoxy gun, but it still worked out really well overall, and I think we got some really good coverage with the adhesive. It is very blue, so just know that adhesive is very blue. But we got all of our wire mesh. Well, we first put down an initial layer of epoxy, put the wire mesh down, and then on top of that I basically cranked the gun as much as I could just to get the material out, and then I used a spreader to spread the material across the entire repair area, kind of feather it down, and really give a lot of surface area for the epoxy to bite into. So it's not the prettiest repair. I'll probably just hit it with a coat once it's all cured, and I'm still debating on if I want to order another can or another cartridge, because I went through a whole cartridge on this just to fill in some spots that could be a little or it could have a little more epoxy. But the plan is to sand this and then just hit it with a quick coat of like flat black, just to kind of hide the blue. I mean, really, this is the back side of the bumper, so no one's ever going to see that, but just for my sake of knowing, and one can of spray paint doesn't cost a lot. So overall, that went really well. I'd say. It did. We even had some weep through, which is good because that means we had good coverage. So I kind of went through with my snippers and snipped off some of the areas that weep through, which is great. The crack still seems really well aligned. I also just snipped off the two zip ties that I had here and the one I had back here. And then also on this big hole that we have, you can see the mesh through there, and that'll give us a nice backing to fill that from the front side. So I'm gonna give the current material a little more time to cure. It's definitely been 30 minutes, so it's actually sandable right now. But my goal is to get the first layer down of front side repair today as well, so we can really get cracking on this bumper. Alright, so I gave the backside adhesive some time to cure. Full cure time is 4 hours on that stuff, but I figured if we're just doing the front side repair here, you can get going on that. Okay, so for the front side repair, we got two materials we got to use for this. So firstly, this two-part epoxy requires an adhesion promoter. So this 05907 polyolefin adhesion promoter is what they recommend per the application instructions for this particular Easy Sand multi-purpose repair material 05887. So the process is you got to clean the surface first. I'm just going to use some isopropyl alcohol, let that flash off, and then you hit this or hit the bumper with a light coat of this. Allow this to dry for 10 minutes, and then you can apply your two-part epoxy repair material. So the goal for this is, obviously we got to fill in all the cracks, right? But also to try and, because I'm sure there's low spots through here, hence all this dark area. So that's obviously where I sanded down the most. So the first priority is to fill in all the cracks or the grooves and the holes, and then take a auto body repair spatula and spread this, and try and spread this to the contour. And then the same thing, so I had to groove out this crack on the front side, so I'm going to be taking the epoxy and applying it, and then using my finger with a rubber glove on to try and smooth this down, so I don't have to spend hours with a sanding tool to try and get this curvature right, because I just wanted to fill in to that to this groove, and I think my finger kind of pushing in the adhesive to the contour around it is going to be the best bet to do that. So got a little low spot over here, and then the same story over here, a crack that we need to repair. So that's going to be the process. So let's go ahead and get to it. Alright, so now we're just going to give this a quick hit with this adhesion promoter. Shake it up a little bit. Ooh, this stuff stinks. Definitely do this in a well-ventilated area. And this stuff does have a 4-minute working time, so even quicker than the backside repair. So we do have to move relatively quickly, but these are the spreaders I'll be using. They're just kind of typical Bondo spreaders. You know, they've got some flexibility to them, so you can spread things nice and thin. But like I said, my first priority is going to be filling in these cracks, all the holes, and then I'll just apply a general amount to the surface and then start trying to blend this to the contour of the bumper. Now, I am by no means a body repair expert. Alright, so our 10 minutes are up, so let's go ahead and prime the nozzle here. Alright, so now we're going to pivot you up. Let's get to this repair. If I overfill the cracked areas, that's fine, because I'll just use the spreader to spread that evenly across the bumper here. Alright, before that gets too far on the working time, I'm going to start spreading that. Just keep filling. Problem is, this stuff comes out so slow. Seems that we're gonna have to wait for this to cure and then come back to get a good top fill pass, because it keeps kind of sinking into the crack area a little bit. Alright, I'm gonna fill. Okay, so put the first coat down. This stuff is definitely, it's not super viscous, it's a little runny, so it doesn't fill into deep areas super well, so you can still see remnants of that crack groove. So I gotta come back in here and do a second coat and try and spread this and fill this up more. So that's what I'm gonna be doing now. I capped the, where'd it go? Capped it, and so now I'm just gonna put a new nozzle on and we'll get to applying a second coat. Alrighty guys, so it is the next day. I left you guys off with me kind of time-lapsing, spreading this epoxy over the bumper. Definitely not as easy of stuff to apply as like traditional body repair materials like Bondo. This stuff, for being an easy sand, you know, top side repair, you know, repair where you're gonna want the finish to look nice, it definitely doesn't spread easily. It's kind of interesting, and I'd say one of the hardest things, especially if you're doing a large repair area, like this is, you know, probably over a square foot of repair area, is getting that much material out of the gun in a reasonable amount of time is pretty difficult, because you have to really apply some force on the trigger there of the gun. And between the 4-minute working time of this stuff, I really wish this stuff had more of a 10-minute working time and it was a little easier to spread. Maybe this stuff is, I don't think it's expired, I only bought it not too long ago. But regardless, we still got it to go on. I think it's just, you know, getting that first initial coat down to really get the core kind of foundation material is the most difficult part, and then next will be obviously knocking this down, and then I'm gonna have to order some more because that cartridge is pretty much empty, and filling in any low and high areas, because I'm sure we've still got a lot of work to do on this. It's gonna take some TLC for sure. I was able to spread this stuff pretty nicely with my finger using a rubber glove. I mean, you can see how many rubber gloves I went through. You know, definitely keep that in mind if you're going to be doing this type of job. And then on top of that, I was also doing some repair on this front fender here, because there were 2 gouges or cracks that I grooved out in this fender. So I'll work on this later. But my primary focus for right now at least is going to be hitting this with a DA sander. I'll probably start with like 80 grit just to start knocking this down, and then I'll switch up to like 150 and kind of see where we're at from there. And you know, it's definitely gonna be tricky here to try and blend this. I was even on eBay last night looking, because there are some torch red bumpers that are in pretty good shape, but we're talking like $800 to $1,000. So you know, I think this is just one of those projects where hopefully, if this just is not turning out good at all, then I'm gonna have to bite the bullet and buy a replacement bumper. But you know, the goal for this project is to really, you know, learn and repair this car, not just buy a bunch of replacement parts. So let's go ahead and get to sanding, and we'll see what we can do with this thing. Okay, so this is after about spending 30-ish minutes working it between the DA sander with 80 grit and 150 grit, and then also a 220 sanding foam block, and it's coming out pretty good. Wasn't too happy with how well this stuff laid down and spread. It kind of like rolls up on itself, but it does sand pretty nicely. I mean, I'd hope so for a product that is called Easy Sand. But overall, it's looking a lot better. I'm definitely more satisfied with investing the money in all of this epoxy, because it isn't cheap. But I think what I got to do now is I got to hit this with just like a quick spritz of like a black paint, so I can feel out where all the high and low spots are. I know for sure there's probably a low spot right here. I mean, I can feel it just by running my hand across it. But I wanted to feel out any others. Like I said, this bumper's definitely going to take a decent amount of work, and I'm not shooting for a A+ body shop repair job here. You know, I'm definitely just trying to get this thing to the point where it looks maybe good from 20 feet, because obviously this is going to need a full repaint as well. So if I can get it to that, I'm going to be pretty happy, especially since this is my first time, well, second time repairing this bumper, but first time really spending a lot of time doing research on how to do it the right way based on the material this bumper is made out of. So I'm going to hit it with a quick spritz of black paint and let that dry for a sec, and then we'll see where our low spots are. So I probably hit the guide coat a little bit too early. The paint was a little gummy, but still kind of got a general idea of some of the low spots. Some are obviously, or some are more obvious than others, but right here was the spot I was suspecting was a low spot, and then, you know, we have some actual like dimples in the coating, so I gotta spot fill those there. And then obviously areas too where you see it ground down into the substrate or the base material, that's gonna be a low spot, so I'll have to do like a light skim coat kind of going up and across on a lot of these. So definitely still need to do some more work on this thing, but I need to order more material. So as soon as I get that material in, I'll keep moving on with this thing. Alrighty everyone, so I think I'm going to end off this particular video here before it gets crazy long, because I know sometimes these videos with doing all this work expanded out over many days can add up quickly, so I want to keep the video somewhat short. I have no idea how long it's going to be already. And on top of that, I can't do much right now with the bumper because I had to order new material, and that won't be here till a week from now. So I'm going to split this bumper repair up into multiple parts just to make it a little bit easier to digest. So this will be part one. I'm pretty happy with the progress so far. I'll be honest, when I first put down that top side repair epoxy, I was a little nervous of like, I don't know how this is going to look, if I'm going to even get the shape close. but it turned out really well, especially with the DA sander, and this stuff sands really nicely, like I said. So I think with a little bit extra, you know, fine touches and filling in the low and high spots, we'll be able to get this thing looking nice. And then part 3 will probably be painting this bumper, because that's obviously we got to get it a nice, somewhat close, solid red color to the rest of the car, and I got to do the repair on the fender too here. So thank you all so much for watching. If you have any comments or questions about what I've done in this video, including all the products, the process, I'm happy to share that information with you all. I spent a lot of time researching this because, believe it or not, this car is not an easy car to repair as far as materials go, especially, excuse me, the front and rear bumpers. But I digress. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you all again so much for watching, and other than that, I will see you guys in the next one.